Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the AtlanTec Festival 2022. Back for its 8th year, this festival promised to be bigger and better than ever before, with 35 events and 40 speakers across the full 5 days. And while this afternoon session is remote, we really would love your participation. So I'd encourage you to follow us on Twitter at AtlanTec Fest, or use the hashtag AtlanTec to get involved in the conversation. Or why not let us know why this topic is of interest using the Q&A panel on screen. Supported by the technology community to enable the sharing of expertise and knowledge, these sessions are shaped by your engagement, and as such, any interaction with the session really helps us ensure the content is of interest. My name is Roisin McLaughlin. I'm the Marketing Director at Storm Technology, and I'm delighted to be here as your event moderator today. So throughout the session, I'll be tracking your questions, so be sure to let us know what you're hoping to get from today's session. And in a moment, we'll hear from my colleague Prateek Desai about low-code and the impact of this technology on the software development industry. A digital native, Prateek is the practice manager for D365 and Power Platform here at Storm Technology, and he leads a team of passionate consultants and developers in the space around low-code. Prateek holds an engineering degree in electronics and telecommunications and a master in information systems from UCC. As an advocate for low-code platforms, Prateek will share his unique perspective based on his experiences working both as an engineer and a consultant. So please do keep those questions and comments coming in, and without further ado, I'll hand you over to my colleague Prateek. Over to you, Prateek.
Rohit, can you see the slides? There you go.
Perfect, they're up now.
Perfect, wonderful. Thanks, Roisin. So what I'll do is I'll quickly start, So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Prateek Desai, like Roisin mentioned, and I'm here today to talk to you about this ongoing phenomena of what low code and no code is, and essentially how it can help us go beyond traditional software development. Now, I understand this topic might not sound as glamorous as the one at 4 p.m. today by Freaky Clown, which is called How Do I Rob Banks, which I am excited about, by the way. However, I'll still try to make this session as much of a steal as possible. So without further ado, let's get right into this. But before I dig deeper into this, let's look at what the agenda might look like for this session. So it kind of gives you all a glimpse of what we're going to cover. So begin with today, we will look at the evolution of low code and no code. I believe that it is imperative to look at the evolutionary factors behind this, because not only does it help us understand the current state of play better, but it also gives us subtle hints about things to come and to look forward to, And then obviously we'll then look at what low code and no code is, whether they are the same, they are any different, and kind of try to see where the confusion lies and if we can alleviate some of those questions. Then moving on to why organizations should adopt a low code, no code approach, and what are the factors that kind of influence adopting this practice. Like with the adoption of any new technology, low code and no code have their own set of challenges, which we'll dive into and also explore on how to overcome them, how to address them to the best of our abilities. And last but not the least, like I said earlier, evolution also helps us peep into the future, albeit without a lot of certainty. But I would like to present my personal thoughts of the art of possible and how it might lead to hyper disruption in this space. So looking at the evolution of application development, for people who have been paying attention to the tech trends for the past decade or so, it is easy to think that the low code, no code phenomena and all these programming platforms are one of the more notable inventions of the recent times. But the reality couldn't be farther from this. It's true that low code, no code has become trendy again over the past 8 years or so, if I'm not wrong. But this programming strategy has a much longer history, and that history is worth exploring to understand what's actually new about these platforms and as we practice them today versus how they were implemented in the previous decades. Now, obviously, I think a lot of people exposed to computer science and the likes of it might have heard of Ada Lovelace, about how she's credited to be the lady who created the first algorithm that was meant to run on Charles Babbage's analytical engine, which was made of metal gears and able to execute if then commands, and also store information in memory. Obviously, her algorithm meant to calculate Bernoulli's sequence of numbers, but that never saw the light of the day because of the challenges with the analytical engine in the first place. And then fast forwarding 100 years later to 1940s, where we saw the first programmable digital computer, the ENIAC, which came under development. In the years of building this massive computer, the size of the room, the role of the programmer started taking shape. During this time, that it was discovered that a programmer's ability or primary responsibility was to find and fix bugs. However, post World War II, coding jobs began spreading, and a program was put in place that lets users compile programming languages that closely resembled English. Coder would write English like code, and a compiler would turn into binary, which is computer's own language. So Grace Hopper from the American Navy invented the first programming language that was meant for non-technical users, Flowmatic. And I highly recommend people going and checking that out. Obviously, this was the hint of the future of no code. And then obviously next came the common business oriented language, COBOL, where programs written in COBOL could run on one or more than different manufacturers' computers. So that was tested successfully on two computers built by different manufacturers. Now, if you take those in terms to mean a programming solution that significantly reduces the amount of effort required to write code, you could argue that the first high-level programming languages, including COBOL or even Fortran for that matter, were something of approximating low-code platforms. This, because they saved developers from having to write arcane codes on multiple applications. So it is funny how coding languages are always developed and meant to be consumed by non-technical users. However, in the next, I think, 3 decades or so, coding languages became more technical and then specific, eventually increasing the skills gap between them. As the digital products became more and more complex, coding languages became more complex as well. This eventually led to the C-suite of programming languages, which morphed into C++, C#, etc., which are still widely used today, even ourselves. So in the 90s, more coding languages emerged with the invention of internet, or rather say the proliferation of internet. The likes of PHP, Python, HTML, JavaScript broke through to develop websites, social media, streaming of applications, phone applications, and data analytics. The role of the coder expanded and siloed into these specific coding functions as kind of coding jobs exploded and became more competitive in the latter part of the 20th century. So for close to 50 years now, coding has literally ruled the land when it comes to tech products, as they advanced exponentially with the power of great code. It wasn't until the last decade, essentially 2010s, until low code was really established. Now Forrester is widely credited with coining this term low code. And their definition of it was essentially low code platforms enable rapid delivery of business applications with a minimal of hand coding and minimal upfront investment in terms of be it setup, training, and the way you deploy them as well. But the key point of note, a revolution which was happening parallelly, which was before all this, is the whole GUI movement. Now, as dogs are characterized by their power of smell and bats by their hearing sense, human beings are visual beings. Research clearly states that human beings process visuals 60,000 times faster than text. So, which is where what we saw in the graphical user interface movement as well, where it kind of evolved serving as an alternative to text commands. So it kind of enabled the users to interact with the machines using graphical interface, an easy and user-friendly substitute to typing commands on the black screen that we used to do before. So low code is essentially a translation of something similar in the programming world. So before getting into what qualifies as low code, no code, let's look at what high code is. As you can see on the screen on the left, high code, or what we traditionally know as conventional programming, is the development of custom software by a team of professional developers who manually write code, who write lines of codes to create functions, features that are desired in any computer program or application for that matter. This in itself brings it itself a process that requires programmers to have in-depth knowledge of the computer languages as well as development environments, the associated deployment methodologies, and even testing practices for that matter. You know, uh, so with this approach alone, businesses are heavily reliant on developer resources. When everything requires a developer's hand, it kind of takes time away from the more valuable work developers could be doing, creating new features and coming up with new innovations. This whole build approach is akin to building a custom suit or a dress, which offers a very close fit to the business requirements. But as with custom tailoring of clothing, it typically means higher costs upfront and a long waiting period as well. So systems from vendors like off the rack clothing might or might not fit as well, but they're typically much cheaper and can be installed faster, and you can get going right away. So sometimes companies can configure the systems, but firms often find it easier to change their business or processes to suit the system, in spite of it should be vice versa. So that's where low code comes into the picture. So low code is or even no code is a software development approach that requires essentially little to no coding to build applications and processes. So if we are used to following Gartner's Magic Quadrant. So in 2019, Gartner's Magic Quadrant for enterprise low code applications, no code capability was one of the criteria for inclusion in the report. However, that changed in 2020, where Gartner stated that no code platforms were not included in that report. However, we did see some products which qualified themselves as no code still being classified as low code. It is no wonder that we are all a little confused here. And that is essentially why I have this definition by Mary K. Pratt from TechTarget up on the screen, and we'll see it in a bit. When as you can see on the top, I've said low code and no code, essentially meaning they're two different things, and we'll talk about it in a bit. As you can see, Mary K. Pratt says that low code, no code platforms are essentially visual software development environments that allow professional developers and business users, in this case we call them citizen developers, to kind of drag and drop application components and connect them together and eventually create an application that is fit for purpose. However, the key thing to note here is it states both enterprise developers and citizen developers. So that essentially tells us that professional developers are still needed. Now we'll obviously look at the differences and get more into detail about it. But if you look at some of the articles or the news reports, if you're following the tech trends, the overused terms of low code and no code are kind of confusing application and software leaders everywhere around the world about which deployment method or development tool to choose in the first place. This is also highlighted in a slide where I remember reading an article with Gartner where they stated that no code is just a marketing term, implying that the tool is purely meant for non-professional developers. Is it really though? Now the jury is still out there, and I believe it is very subjective. Now my personal view on that is they are and can be two different things completely based on the product or the platform that you're looking at, and secondly, what are you as an organization doing with that product or platform. Now, as an organization, we have had experiences where we were able to deliver all the business requirements without using a single line of code, by using all of the all the off-the-shelf capabilities, and some experiences where extensive customizations were needed, some of which involved coding, and ironically enough, both on the same platform. So which is why I go back to saying it's a very subjective thing and based on the parameters that I alluded to earlier. Now, if I were to define them as two different things, I would be saying like, okay, low code platforms is or low code in itself is a software development approach that requires little to no coding to build applications and processes. The case in point being little to no coding. Now, both low-code and no-code platforms encapsulate all the work that happens behind the scene and create a layer of abstraction. In both cases, users can visually select and connect reusable components that represent particular steps, capabilities, and kind of link them together to create workflows, web pages, etc. Now, using these low-code tools, developers, both professional and citizen, by the way, focus on building a platform which kind of essentially provides self-service tools that allows business users to control the assembly of the experience. So it kind of puts business users in the driver's seat, so to say. They can also create powerful components that can be reused for other applications. Now, however, if I were to kind of distinguish what a no-code platform is, it is a platform that again uses a visual development interface, but to enable non-technical users to build applications, by dragging and dropping the software components to create a full app. The whole assembly of no-code approach puts the business users directly in the driver's seat. And true to its name, these solutions involve no need to write a single line of code once they are launched. Instead, they rely on forms configurations and simple input tools to manage the whole experience of the platform. No-code platforms are great for solving individual departmental issues, like updating content or assets on a page without pulling the attentions of the developers from more complex stuff or projects. They can also be leveraged to help scale your existing solutions using the more of a cookie cutter approach. So that now we have defined what essentially might be a differentiation between a low-code platform and a no-code platform. So I would just like to highlight some key differences. And obviously you can have a list of them, but the key three differences are essentially what you see up on the screen here is, to start with, low-code platforms require a certain element of technical knowledge and allow good coders to work faster. The more powerful the tools to speed up technical development, the better suited it is for coders, which is essentially why they are targeted towards both technical users and citizen developers as well. No-code platforms, on the other hand, target business users specifically. These platforms provide no way of manually editing code because there is a clear layer of abstraction there. So instead, the business users focus on creating the best and the easiest user experience possible, keeping them completely away from the technical details. So the easier the interface it is to understand, the better suited it is for business users, which is the case with no-code platforms. Now, coming to the system integration part, now depending on the sort of application that you're building, you might have to integrate data from many platforms. Now, while low-code platforms give us the excellent system integration capabilities by managing APIs better. However, no-code platforms are rather more closed because of the security concerns, the regulatory challenges, and that kind of lead closed ecosystem of a product. That kind of might lead to increasing technical debt from any possible outcome, which kind of leads into the next point, which is like no-code platforms, since they are closed, are ideal for developing applications that address minor business problems on their own. Low-code platforms, on the other hand, make it feasible high-demand apps that help important business operations, which is what goes back to me saying they can be different based on the platform you're looking at and the way we look at them and utilize them for our business requirements or system requirements, or even digital transformation for that matter. Now that we kind of have a better handle over of what these two platforms are, but for the rest of things, we'll kind of put them under the same umbrella because they kind of have the same kind of influencing factors in their adoption. So if we were to look at why adopt this whole new phenomena of low-code, no-code approach, the first and foremost being is increased productivity. It has been observed that organizations that take a centralized and coordinated approach to this whole hyper-automation approach with the help of low-code have generally found more efficiencies that map directly to their business goals. And it is achieved by not only making it easier for citizen developers, but also for professional developers by providing them with attributes like readily available dev toolkits, a visual interface, reusable components, off-the-shelf API connectors, and a lot more. And on the other hand, by optimizing the user experience, you increase the adoption from the citizen side of things as well. So the more people use the solution, the more effective they are at their jobs and building applications. And at the end of the day, you maximize your ROI as an organization. And part of ROI is obviously lower costs. And this is, I think, rather more obvious than the others, is since low code or even no code requires less professional programming expertise, which helps organizations to close the whole IT talent gap that we are seeing now without requiring or without the need to hire them into their own teams or in-house. This brings down the implementation and maintenance costs considerably. And obviously the other factors that you see up on the screen also contribute to that eventually. And from a more technical perspective, reusability is also a very important factor that kind of drives this whole approach. So you can have a library of reusable components, like using the elements of workflows, UI, UX items, etc. This means that one can take advantage of some pre-built components and merge them to form a larger, more complex application. Uh, uh, and interestingly enough, some low-code platforms are known to use AI to inspect the applications for quality and reusability as well, by prompting things. This brings us to the conversation about buy versus build. We have all come across this uh, traditional question of buy versus build. On further evaluation, one might realize that both approaches have some pros and cons to their adoption. Now, for years, the balance is kind of tipped in favor of buying commercial off-the-shelf products over building applications in-house for obvious reasons. But although buying something off the shelf can be quicker, but it will also be expensive and likely might not be a perfect fit for your organization. So something building internally will likely provide a more perfect fit, but it will take more time and command valuable IT resources. This is where low code allows us to maximize our return on investment by combining the two approaches. So with the right platform, we can now buy and then build essentially. So it's no longer a buy versus build, but more a collaborative approach instead. Uh, Looking at scalability and flexibility, all kinds of solutions can be implemented using these platforms, be it process automation apps to mission critical systems as well. Uh, the solutions have been known to be easy to scale, especially on the cloud native architecture that we're seeing in the past few years. And obviously, a lot of these platforms have direct integrations that are enabled within themselves with low code API accessibility. Now, all of these factors lead and contribute to the speed. The structure of modern business teams are such that they have changed significantly, especially in the past 2 years, as we have all experienced. And it is contributed by the aspects of hybrid working and changing responsibilities as individuals as well. So low code enables the organizations to increase production and accelerate timelines for innovation in a very highly customizable way. This is becoming a very critical element in this digital age when organizations must race to not only meet customer demands but also worker demands because of the whole new generation of workers that we're seeing in the workforce now, or be disrupted by others who actually do so. So low code and no code APIs and other tools are kind of enabling companies to integrate new applications into their existing technological stack and in a more seamless manner, uh, in a lift and shift approach rather than completely taking a rip and replace approach. Uh, this gives us the ability as organizations to enable faster decision making among cross-functional teams by building some collaboration tools on these platforms. Uh, Obviously, customer expectations are higher than ever. These platforms give us the ability or the flexibility to adapt to market changes and customer needs quickly through fast delivery and up-to-date delivery of latest applications on the operational side and even the customer experience side. So this kind of prompts us to think about innovation in the fast lane. So now that you've seen the factors that influence the adoption of low code, let's look at some of the statistics that has come out of some research. And obviously on the left, you can see Gartner's latest Magic Quadrant about what are the low code application platforms that are at the forefront of this revolution. Obviously, Microsoft is up there as one of the leaders with Salesforce. Now, if we were to get into the statistics side of things, Gartner in their study kind of predicted that 65% of the app activity will come from no code alone in the next by 2024. And that is kind of seconded by another research that Microsoft and International Data Corporation did, where they expect 500 million apps to be built in the next half decade alone, which is more than all the things that we've built in the last 40 years. That says a lot about the speed alone. One of the case studies I came across on the Microsoft side of house is how it was implemented by Pepsi. Obviously, they leveraged the Microsoft Power Platform, where they equipped 900 field personnel with efficiency enhancing mobile application that saved them as much as $500,000 in the first year alone. So it's not only the factors, but it is backed by stats and actually case studies and research that has gone into evaluating the metrics as well. So lastly, you can see that on the more internal side of things, a recent study by McKinsey stated that organizations that empower citizen development, which essentially means adoption of this whole low-code, no-code approach, have scored 33% higher on the innovation measures than those do not, because it kind of helps you innovate both from the business side of things, because you're empowering them with application building capabilities, but you're also empowering developers and the technical teams to focus on more complex and architectural stuff and innovate to drive business growth in a much faster lane. Now, as a sequential step, as an organization, we have let's say made a choice of adopting the whole approach that we're talking about here, but it's also imperative to understand what are the challenges that come with it. Now, when I say challenges, they are not challenges coming in from the platform alone, but it's more about how we adopt them. So finding the right fit is key here. So if you look at the most common challenge that you will find across is the ability to implement complex use case. So what has happened is the increasing complexity of software development has led to creation of domain-driven design, which kind of serves as a reference point and a set of standard to build business applications according to specific subject area. So that kind of makes them a little rigid outside of the scope of what they're meant to be. At times the argument that off-the-shelf platforms development in less time with the reduced technical debt means sacrificing customizability. Now, we will see how it's not the case, but it's one of the common notions that we see out there in the market. But it is worth noting that not all low-code platforms are dependent on vendor-supplied customization. So there is a partner ecosystem. There is a whole community of developers that you can work with, beyond the vendor itself. So at the same time, it can be taken up in-house as well. Now, talking about taking it up in-house, we need to be aware of the learning curve involved in here. Now, as you saw in the definition of these platforms, they're much simpler to use than your traditional programming tools. However, business users, or what we refer to as citizen developers, still need to learn and practice how those different components of the platform fit together, so that you're achieving those expected outcomes from the platform. Security and governance. Now this is a concern that we have seen with pretty much all the people that work with, because using a platform that was developed by an external party always comes with some visibility concerns. You're consuming the software, and therefore you don't know about the source code, the associated vulnerabilities, or potentially the level of testing or the rigor the platform has gone through, which is why it's important to evaluate the platforms and the vendor that you'll be working with. The other area is the generation of shadow IT problems. Now, shadow IT arises when the IT side of the people are unaware of the applications that are being added to their software environments, so that fear of low code potentially raises the risk of that happening, simply because people outside IT department can also develop software. Now obviously we'll see how to overcome them in a bit, but the next is This is something similar to complex use case is the flexibility and the customization capabilities of these platforms. Now, this is one of the most common complaints about these platforms. It stems from the opinions coming from people who have had bad experiences with one platform and assume that the other ones are the same. But this ecosystem is too huge to kind of generalize it in this sense, So in fact, customization options vary widely from one platform to the other. Some will limit your customization options, but there are a lot of them or a lot of platforms who kind of provide access to their underlying code as well. So this brings us to the whole integration conversation. Now, I understand rapid application development allows companies to customize their processes, that maintains all the business knowledge inherent in those legacy systems that you might have in there, which are often have been accumulated over the company's history. Now, sometimes it might be difficult to integrate with a variety of systems that you might have already in place. This might be due to the availability of system support to manage and utilize the APIs built on different technology stacks. So you kind of need something to tie them together. And last but not the least is the whole fear of vendor lock-in. Now, vendor lock-in typically arises from one or more of the following things that you see up on the screen is dependency being created because of the vendor supplied customization and vendor supplied professional services. And lastly, of course, the proprietary or licensed technology that they have to offer. Now, low-code is a relatively young market compared to the others, so dependence on vendor-supplied professional service can be a concern, but now we are seeing a common trend of people being able to overcome because of the more adoption of this whole new phenomenon. Now, we have seen the challenges, we have understood the platform, but the next obvious step is us as organizations asking how to go about it. So obviously there are various ways to do it, but I've tried to sum up in 5 key points essentially. And one of the first important thing being is to start small, however, always have scalability in mind. I think the way to start small is to establish business value and link into your strategic objectives for the years to come in the form of proof of concepts. So these platforms enable us to create proof of concepts more rapidly than ever, So you should look at low-code platform that is scalable to support future demands as well. So inability to scale your platform will prove to be a major showstopper for your digital innovation. So it's very important that although you start small, you have that future in mind as well. The right platform must support continuous growth of users or even developers in the enterprise as the demand for that, for the adoption of that application keeps increasing. But at the same time, keeping your total cost of ownership manageable, if not less. The next is about enabling the hybrid approach. And this stems from the challenges that we saw in the previous slide. In order for citizen developers to build apps that meet the business or the user expectations, it is imperative to use the platform that enables collaboration between both business and IT. At the end of the and of course developers from a professional technical standpoint. But the end of the day, you and your developers or your partner services companies share the same goal: to solve problems efficiently, increase your productivity, and make an impact on the organization in every way possible. Apps can be built by business users using the no-code approach, but the extensibility part of it can be taken advantage of by introducing the whole low-code with the help of developers for more complex use cases. That kind of transpires also into the whole culture of fostering innovation. There should be a greater impetus on using these platforms to evaluate the art of possible as well. And I kind of alluded to it when I talked about proof of concepts. So low-code platforms assist organizations to be hyper-disruptive in all areas of business, be it your applications related to go-to-market systems, applications related to improving operational efficiencies, or providing dynamics insights. You name it, they can help. It's all about how we adopt them, So this mindset essentially builds an innate creativity and entrepreneurship to automate back-office tasks, which can not only improve internal operations, but also execute ideas by quickly moving from inception to prototyping an actual go live of the application. Governance policies, this is something that we commonly see when we implement Microsoft Power Platform. Essentially, uh, as far as governance policies are concerned, there's no one size fits all approach. One of the most fundamental questions we need to be asking as organizations is, if we are adopting the whole low code, no code approach, first of all, what is allowed to be built on a platform and who builds them? What kind of training can be provided to citizen developers? How will that be taken care of? And last but not the least, who owns the approval process? Is it the business users, departmental heads, the IT, or you might have a technical architect in place? So it's very important to establish these practices. The second point being is we need to have set data policies by that adopting practices like organizations should only store data in one place to prevent inconsistencies, and it goes back to a business need of a single view of customers. So it has business value uh, as well as preventing duplication, synchronization issues, integration, and lots of it. um, I remember one of the technology leaders from ServiceNow mentioning that a properly deployed low-code platform, which with adequate governance policies and empowered citizen developers, is a whole lot safer than folks building macros in spreadsheets and passing them around in an email. So with the right approach, we can kind of incorporate these as part of the company culture as well. And last but not the least, to do all of this, it's important to measure the success, because we need to evaluate the matrix of these platforms providing business benefits. Because at the end of the day, that's the ultimate goal. You know. So one of the few areas where we can start measuring success is by looking at metrics like speed of deployment. So how long does it take for me to go live with a certain idea? Has it contributed to increase in efficiencies? And last but not the least, although this is not a direct thing, but has it improved customer satisfaction, and how has it done so? And also, it is imperative to measure the user adoption increase as well, because it typically does so along with your business benefits that you're seeking, be it optimized utilization of resources, improved profitability on the business side, but also maximizing return on your investment when it comes to these platforms. So now that we have looked at how to, I'll not spend a lot of time on this, because this is essentially an ecosystem that medium.com proposed when we talk about low code uh, and no code ecosystems. Obviously this is not an exhaustive list, as I cannot see Power BI in the business intelligence box out there. Neither can I see Dynamics 365 under customer service and CRM, both of which ironically I work very closely with. But as we see, different organizations and platforms have developed specialized platforms to cater for different areas. So it wouldn't be harmful to say that we have all been exposed to web and mobile application development by using tools like Webflow, which is very intuitive. We have all heard about Shopify making it easier for business to get on the whole e-commerce experience and kind of grow their business in the digital world. So we have had a look at essentially what a low-code platform is, how to, but I would like to go back to the whole evolution. We looked at the evolution of low-code in the initial slides, and how it came to be. And one of the reasons to understand the evolution is it also gives us insight into things to come, what to expect, and what are the possibilities in terms of how to or what these low-code platforms will evolve into. So this excites me personally on a lot of level. So let's talk about what the future might look like for these platforms. Now this might be the geeky side of me going bonkers, thinking about the art of possible. I would love to hear some comments or feedback or questions on these in this chat. So feel free to let me know, and we'll obviously discuss it. But the first one is rather more obvious. Although these platforms are meant to be visual modeling tools, which is what you see is what you get, I feel they still have a long way to go to make it easier for non-technical users. A lot of these platform creator tools are not intuitive enough for users to have a shorter learning curve. So I'm not saying it's not something that people can wrap their heads around, but the shorter the learning curve, the better it is when it comes to maximizing the adoption. you know. The ability to embed voice assistants in these platforms. Now, I think it might be the lazy version of me that hopes for low code, no code platforms to have voice assistance capabilities to assist us with application development. This might also open up the possibilities of being able to configure these applications on our phones by simple voice commands, and then obviously Siri telling us how much of a good job we did. So again, like I said, this might be just me thinking from a lazy version of perspective. Machine learning. Now, when I say machine learning, this is not so much on the actual output application side of things, as those things are already available in various guises. A lot of progress has been made in that space. What I'm alluding to here is the ability for the platform to tell citizen developers on what they are doing right or wrong while building the application itself. Now, the learning data can be modeled based on learnings from how a developer would approach it, how other organizations have leveraged the same platform to achieve similar end results, etc. For example, I'm building a dashboard showcasing sales numbers by quarter. Now, I might not be doing it wrong from an output perspective, but there might be a better way of doing it based on what other organizations have already done when creating similar dashboards. So can these systems help me predict that? So that is something that excites me. And last but not the least, going back to our definition of low code and no code, and this is what we'll see across the board is they are called as visual development environments, but I firmly believe they are not just that, because they can also be meant for professional developers to reduce the millions of lines of code that they might have to write otherwise. I was thinking about this on the other weekend, only to realize after a quick search that there is already some great progress being made in this exciting area, and that kind of got me all excited. After a quick research, I came across an artificial intelligence company called OpenAI who have released a platform called as Codex. So it is essentially a new system that automatically writes software code for you using only simple prompts written in plain English. You see how we are going back to the whole evolution of the no-code platform. It is always how it was meant to be. So going back to what Codex is essentially based on the whole revolutionary deep learning platform GPT-3 that OpenAI trained on nearly all publicly available written text on the internet. Now, if I show you a quick glimpse while I talk about it, OpenAI Codex is very capable in Python, but it is also proficient in over a dozen languages, be it JavaScript, your Go, Perl, Ruby, TypeScript, or even Shell for that matter. As you can see on the screen here, what they have essentially done and trained the model is I can type in simple English about creating a game. Let's say when a rocket is clicked, I want a certain text to be displayed. And on the right, you can see that the code is automatically getting generated. So I believe this should also qualify as low code because it is kind of reducing developers' effort to write tons of lines of code that they otherwise have to. So this is just my version of what I feel low code or no code platform might be in the next few years to come, and I hope we get to see a lot of these materialize. So that's it from my side. Thank you for listening to me, and what we'll do is I'll hand it back over to Roisin to see if you have any questions.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Yep, perfect. So thanks again. It was great to see the evolution of software development along with the potential impact of low code on the business and technology landscape. Personally, I found what the future looks like quite interesting. I'm not a techie, so it's nice to know that there may be a time where I can just use my voice and software will be developed for me, because it would be good if I tried. So just before we dive into the Q&A and chat, I'd just like to remind everyone that participation would be great. It's really helpful to get your take on things and to understand how you may have experienced low code within your organization. So please do feel free to use the Q&A or chat box. I can see I'm not alone in my interest in the topic. There's been a number of questions and comments, so I'll just dive into them now. So for the first question, Prateek, you touched on security and governance earlier, and you may have already slightly addressed this question, but I was wondering if you could share your experiences with low code, no code governance and security. You did touch on the challenges, so perhaps if you could even share some tips to overcome these challenges, that would be great.
Yeah, great question. From our experiences, what we have essentially seen is we give the citizen developers the ability to kind of build applications great, but we completely ignore the whole aspect of data security, access controls that they're completely oblivious to, which falls traditionally more on the IT side of things. But I think we need to develop citizen developers as well in that regard, to make sure that when they are creating applications which involve sensitive data, they're putting the right security policies in place. They are making sure that the access controls are in place as well. This is for some reason like ignored side of the things, because you want to get that app running and go live quickly. But you might not see the drawbacks of this in the short term, but over the period of a couple of years, you will realize that there might be some sensitive information that goes outside your departments that is not meant to be, and then going back and fixing those is much more challenging than adopting them from the word get-go itself. So that's one of the recommendations that I would have, is to kind of make sure that you establish standard protocols to go back about, okay, who is developing what, does it go through an approval processes, what are the development environments that are in place, is it being tested for vulnerability or even general testing for that matter. So it's important to have these standard protocols in place.
Great, thank you. And then I see comment in the chat around employee empowerment for driving productivity gains. So based on your experience, have you any suggestions, Prateek, around how businesses can empower citizen developers and reduce the day-to-day workload on IT? Because I imagine it's not something most business users will be comfortable or used to being asked.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would start by identifying people in your organization who have that innate desire for problem solving and who are keen on actually using technology to solve the problems, because those are the people who will kind of add value and bring ideas to the table. That's the first line of action. Obviously, and then we need to enable them by providing the right kind of training. Like I mentioned, it needs to be about development, how to use the platform, what are the security policies that need to be put in place. So it needs to cover kind of essentially everything that you want to achieve as an organization in your digital transformation roadmap, and obviously there needs to be an evaluation process, like I mentioned earlier, just to make sure that they're aware about the kind of projects or applications they're developing, what are the implications of it, and they're going to the right people. So yeah, I mean, training, identifying first people who are keen on that, and then training them to adopt this whole practice will go a long way.
Great. And Prateek, Ted is asking if you have any comments on the challenges for educators when students can cheat using OpenAI.
Well, that's a really great question, and I believe this question comes up whenever we talk about AI, is how people can circumnavigate those things. I kind of talked about it from a low-code perspective, but I think it's more of an ethical conundrum that's always been part of the whole AI conversation. We need to kind of build policies within the platform itself about how the output of a certain AI is being utilized. So I think it's human first, and then about implementing those policies in the coding practices as a whole. So it's twofold essentially.
And Prateek, this is what I'm going to ask, if you don't mind. So in terms of low code, it's something I've heard customers comment from time to time, is does the size of an organization actually matter when it comes to using low code?
The simple answer would be both yes and no, because it doesn't matter when it comes to whether should we adopt it or not. I think it's a very obvious thing that there should be some form of adoption, no matter the size of organization you are, or you are in your growth phase, you are already an established enterprise, or you're a very small startup, or you might have lesser users, or you might have hundreds of users. So no, it doesn't matter when it comes to should you whether adopt it or not. Mm-hmm. Yes, it matters when it comes to evaluation of the platform, because one of the first questions you should be asking yourself is, what does my digital requirement at this moment look like, and what does my next few years look like when it comes to how my business might grow, and eventually my digital needs might grow as well. So it becomes very important while evaluating the platform. So yes, like if I were to give a black and white answer, yes, it does matter.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I don't think we have any more questions in. I'll just give it another moment or two just in case anyone wants to submit anything else. Otherwise, I will probably wrap up this session because I'm sure everyone's time is very valuable. So yeah, that seems to be it. We'll be around in the chat in the lobby anyway if anyone does have any additional questions or comments or speak to Prateek directly. So I will wrap up for now. A huge thank you, Prateek, for your time today and for sharing your insights, and for the AtlanTec community for inviting us to speak today. I'd like to remind everyone that AtlanTec Festival will continue all week with a lot more exciting sessions. That's the ones Prateek has mentioned. So if you haven't signed up, be sure to check out the website www.atlantec.ie for a full list of upcoming sessions. And don't forget to follow along on Twitter at AtlanTec Fest. Hopefully we'll meet again in person in Galway next year. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.